Hello, all, and welcome to the Movie Bears podcast. I'm Brad Harris, and each week, or mostly each week, sometimes schedules get crazy, I'm joined by some of my favorite husky, hairy, huggable homos to talk about something near and dear to our bear hearts. That, of course, being the world of film. We love movies so much. It's literally in the title of our show. So we've got a great discussion, I feel, coming up. We're going to be talking about Nomadland, just coming out of the Oscars as the Best Picture winner. Do we agree with the Best Picture label? We will find out. That's a big hanging question mark. Also, do you agree? Big hanging question mark. Be sure to jump into the live chat. Let us know your thoughts. We're super curious. We're also going to be bringing you some Oscar talk, which we haven't had a big opportunity to do quite yet. We chatted a little bit a couple weeks ago, but we got some more to dive into. And then, of course, some plugs are coming your way. So lots and lots to talk about. But before we jump in, let me introduce you to my co-host. Jim Pugliafico is here in the virtual studio. Hey, babe, how are you?
Hey, I'm pretty good. Maybe we're a little rusty, a little out of practice, it feels like. I don't know, but we'll get it back together, I promise. This is going to be a fun episode talking about, one of the bigger movies this year, one of the most talked about movies this year, and, more on the Oscars. Everyone's always got something to say about the Oscars, and we do too. So, yeah, I'm ready. How about you guys?
Oh, definitely. Will is here with us as well, the estimable William Melendez. How's it going for you, Will?
Hey, it's going great. One of my favorite things in the absolute world to do is to tune in with the two of y'all and talk movies. And yeah, we got kind of a doozy to talk about today. So I'm over the moon. I'm so excited right now.
Excellent. I feel your excitement. It's palpable. Well,
oh my God! Oh, it's motherfucking Nomadland time! Woo!
Yeah, there we go.
Nomadland
time.
You need one of those air horns, like at a hockey game.
Get in the RV.
One of those. Here's a word from the past: a vuvuzela.
That's a little more didgeridoo, but still, yeah. So I'm obviously pretty excited, as you can tell.
Well, good. Well, why don't we kick things off by diving into a little post-Oscar chat? We were going to do this last week, and then, just the craziness totally hit. We weren't able to record last week. Sorry about that, folks. But we are back, and we still have some things that we want to talk about. So coming out of the Oscars, obviously Nomadland walked away with Best Picture. We can talk a little bit more about that when we get to our review of the film. But Jim, Will, were you fellas happy with some of the winners coming out of the Oscars, or did you feel like they kind of missed the mark in a weird year for film? Thanks, COVID.
Let me see. I guess I'll go first. I think, first of all, as I think I mentioned the first time we talked about the Oscars, I didn't actually watch the broadcast. And I know, so in terms of like how the broadcast went, I can't really comment on that. I know Will had a bunch to say about it last time. I think you really kind of enjoyed the way they did the Oscars this year. But in terms of like what the winners and, and what was bestowed with some of these golden men, I think for the most part, I think it was pretty happy. I don't know if I would have won any pools. If there was one, Will, I don't know if you guys had a pool. We didn't have one this year. I didn't participate in any, but I think, and that really doesn't matter. But in the end, I don't know if there were any like terrible. I don't like in some recent years. I don't know if there were any like really egregious awards necessarily. I think I was mostly overall pleased.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty good way of putting it, all things considered. For me, I especially like years where there is a bit of variety to the winners. There are some years where it's movie A wins 10 Oscars straight, taking like half the categories, and that's fun. That's exciting to see someone essentially like hit a grand slam and then go around the bases a couple extra times. But I prefer years like this where more films get a chance to show a little bit of love. And here, I believe, and I could be wrong on this, but I think no film got more than 3 of the awards. And that's really good. A lot of diversity in terms of just the number of films represented, and also in terms of the quality. My pool is just a pool that I do for myself. I don't so I compete against myself. I did well enough, but honestly, of all the winners this year, nobody won that I was unhappy with. There were some that wouldn't have been my first pick, but that doesn't matter. This is, when they say it's an honor just to be nominated, it really is. It's fun to celebrate all of the films in the categories and to root for one over the other. But it doesn't hurt my feelings if my second favorite movie in the category ends up sweeping. That's cool too. I really liked a lot of these films. In fact, most of these films.
How about you, babe?
Yeah, for me, it like I said, it was kind of a weird year for film. Not a ton came out, but the things that did come out, I feel like we got some really solid entries. Nomadland, again, we'll get to that later, but not a surprise at all. Anthony Hopkins, the father, best actor. I don't think anybody can argue that wasn't, a crazy standout performance. My octopus teacher. I'm not really a doc guy, but I was very, very happy to see that win Best Documentary. It was just phenomenal. Thomas Corbett in the chat says, do you guys put these on YouTube? Thomas, hello, welcome. We do indeed put them on YouTube. In fact, it's airing on YouTube right now. If you go to our YouTube channel, you can see it. But it's also available after the show. You can access all of our back catalog of video podcasts on YouTube. Just search for Movie Bears Podcast. What did you guys feel about Soul winning Best Animated Film? I'm curious.
This was the year I was kind of rooting against Pixar a little bit. I mean, let me put this in perspective. Soul was a really good movie. I enjoyed Soul quite a bit, but I don't know. I thought there was some really strong competition from a movie called Wolfwalkers. Babe, I know that didn't really resonate with you as much as it did with me, but I thought that had a chance maybe to unseat the I don't know how many in a row now Pixar has won. It seems like every time they put out a movie, you can count on it being at least nominated. But yeah, I mean, Soul was fine. But I don't know. It seems like every year there's maybe that one movie you're kind of rooting for, kind of the little engine that could, and when you're going up against a giant like Pixar with the track record they have, with the marketing they have, with the campaign I'm sure that they have, it's hard for a smaller movie, no matter how fantastic it was, to kind of win over the Academy voters, I think.
You can't really be upset. Like Soul is an exceptional movie with beautiful animation, a wonderful story. The soundtrack and score is literally Oscar winning, as we saw in another category. And I think that any other year it would have been an easy first place pick for me. Yeah, I think Wolfwalkers was the better movie. It's one of the top 5 movies I saw last year. Wolfwalkers is just sort of like next level, but Soul is a very, very worthy winner. So it's another one of those, like, it wasn't my first pick, but who cares? Like, it's still like a good film won.
Yeah.
It's always nice when that happens, where it's like there's a pool of films, you love all of them. It's maybe, I don't know, exciting to hope that the one you loved most gets the award, but like if it doesn't and it goes to something else you loved, like, okay, something else you loved still got it. Jim, you're right. I wasn't the biggest fan of Wolfwalkers, but it had beautiful art and great music, and a story I think that was enjoyable. So great to see it nominated, especially because that was a film that came out on a streaming platform, right? Rather than did it get any kind of theatrical release? Wasn't it just an
It
Apple
was
TV?
right in the middle of
release?
COVID. The height
Yeah.
of COVID, I think.
Yeah, if it did any theatrical, it was like one of those throw it in a theater to qualify, but I don't think it even had to for kind of based on its release window.
Right. So, again, streaming is kind of changing the landscape of how we do things. And I think COVID is sort of accelerating the timetable on that. But again, just great to see so many wonderful films.
I think the only way, I was just thinking of an interesting idea if Pixar had done Wolfwalkers. I don't know how that would have turned out. It sounds like a great idea to me. But of course, that's probably not going to happen. But then we might have seen a Wolfwalkers win, I think.
Well, it's also hard because it's technically the third film in sort of like a trilogy after Secret of Kellis and Song of the Sea. And so there was a little bit more of it sort of had its foot in the door for a chance of winning, because the Academy does sort of rewarding at the third end of a trilogy for the body of work versus, the individual film. We saw that with Return of the King the year that it won, I think 97 Oscars that year.
Mm-hmm.
But I'd also like to recommend, this one got no conversational points this last year. We didn't even really talk about it just because it sort of came and went. But Over the Moon is actually a really good animated movie too. It's it was one of those ones it's an honor to be nominated type films. It had no shot of winning, but a cool little story. I liked the characters. I liked what it was going for. The animation was fun, and it was easy to watch on Netflix. It was a Netflix release. So, if you're looking for something else to check out, that is a really good, Saturday morning, I want to watch something light, but not too light to sort of start the weekend. It's a good little film.
Yeah, I that is one. So like I said, I didn't see all the nominated films this year. And that is one that I didn't get to see. So I don't think you saw it either, right, Brad?
No, I didn't.
But Will, based on your recommendation, I think I'm going to have it on my list, and get to that on streaming. I'm sure it's streaming somewhere.
Oh yeah, it's a Netflix. It came out on Netflix, so you can, yeah. And that's what's sort of neat about this year. A lot of the films that we're talking about here, we just talked about some Disney Plus releases and some Apple TV Plus releases, but Netflix and Hulu have several films that are in several of the different categories, not just as nominees, but also as winners. So this is, compared to a lot of years, one of the easier years to catch up. Not necessarily on every film nominated in every category, but you can go through and catch, I believe, the majority of at least the winners through the streaming platforms. And again, a lot of years you're still at this point just sitting there waiting to try to catch up to, some random film that takes forever to release.
Well, and I'll tell you, for me, that gets really frustrating when it's all right, I just watched the Oscars. I just saw all these incredible films winning awards. I want to see them. Oh, sorry, it's going to be 2 more months before they're out on video. And then they come out on video, and at that point, you've completely forgotten, unless you're a super film buff like Jim or Will, where you've got a list of films that you keep track of, they may just slip through the cracks, so it's, streaming is both a blessing and a curse, I guess, when it comes to this stuff.
Yeah. And before we get off animated feature, Onward, I know that was one we liked this year. Now, was that Pixar also? Disney Pixar?
Disney
I think that was
Pixar.
Yeah, Disney. Yeah, Pixar had their name on it. Yeah.
Or wasn't DreamWorks? I don't know.
No, it was a Disney Pixar. It was like Pixar's kind of in the door twice this year, which good on them,
which may have split the vote away from Wolfwalkers a little bit, unfortunately. Possibly.
I think
because I think Onward and Soul probably had by far the more more eyes on it.
I would imagine that it was less that Onward split the vote from Wolfwalkers, and more that Onward could have been the spoiler that gave a Wolfwalkers win, sort of like splitting
I
some
got you.
votes off of Soul.
Gotcha.
But
Yeah,
I
yeah.
think that the power of that film, the big push to see more diversity on screen, which was good that we saw a lot of that this year, and the fact that I think people were already sort of keying up the fact that, okay, this was going to be Reznor, Ross, and Jean-Baptiste's Oscar win for the score as well. Like, it was already pretty easy to see the lane where Soul becomes like your best animated feature.
Yeah,
Jim, I will say, Jim, I think Wolfwalker actually did win. It's just the ballots for the Oscar committee when they cast their votes were made of bamboo. So maybe if they'd had pandas come in to sniff them out, may have ensured that the right film won.
That was a problem. Yeah, Soul definitely had
bamboo ballots.
A whole bunch of bamboo ballots shipped in. I think that's what happened.
It was tampering. We need to like rent out some stadiums and like recount the balloting from the Oscar committee. I mean, it's a thing.
Oh man, look at the time.
All that to say, that's fucking bullshit.
You think?
Yeah, just a skosh.
I would recommend very strongly for anyone, just go down this list of the winners. Strike that. Go down this list of the nominees. Find something that maybe interests you and give it a shot. Like, The Father is an absolutely like terrifying film experience. Like, it is, like we don't often see horror films nominated. The Father is not categorized as a horror movie, but it could be, just the way that it's presented and the way that you experience it and the way that you feel it. It is, keeps you on the edge of your seat.
Yeah, it almost feels like a one of those classic Twilight Zone episodes. You know what I mean? Like kind of that kind of horror, psychological horror. And there's some stuff going on in the narrative of that where you're just like, what's going on? Especially there's scenes where like, wait, did I just fall asleep for a part of this or what? Like, what's happening now? Where like, I'm not going to spoil anything, but it's just like unexpected things happen. And you're like, wait, it makes you question what you had seen before. Let's put it that way.
Olivia freaking Colman in that, like, like we talk about Anthony Hopkins and how this arguably is the strongest performance of his career, which is amazing. But Olivia Colman is in it, just absolutely knocking it out of the park. You've got Ma Rainey's Black Bottom from this last year, which I think had two remarkable performances from Chadwick Boseman and, of course, Viola Davis playing Ma Rainey herself. I'm looking at this category. I'm looking at this list of nominees, and I'm not seeing like. There's like maybe like two, like there's a few I didn't see, but like of the ones that I did, like there's like two films I wouldn't recommend, and the rest that I would say watch right now. Go. And that's, again, that doesn't usually happen. We've had years when fucking Suicide Squad wins an Oscar. That's not this year.
No. Yeah, I guess that was we talked a little bit about that earlier, kind of the end of the Oscars and how people were kind of expectant of Chadwick Boseman posthumous win for Ma Rainey's Black Bottom. And of course, Anthony Hopkins wins very deservingly, though. I mean, this wasn't a like out of nowhere. I think Anthony Hopkins was certainly one of the front runners in that category, that stacked category. Stephen Yoon was nominated for Minari, and he was great in Minari. Riz Ahmed in Sound of Metal. I know that was a powerhouse performance.
This is a year where Gary Oldman was probably the weakest nominee in the acting category. Yeah, which Gary freaking Oldman being the weakest nominee means that you've got a pretty stacked category.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
So true. True. Well, it'll be interesting to see what happens with the Oscars next year, of course, with COVID continuing to throw a wrench, right, in the movie making process. Films are still getting delayed and, all kinds of crazy happening. But I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, I think what we're seeing for next year is we're seeing films that were supposed to be released in 2020 now getting released in the 2021 window. And I think that's going to kind of fill the gap a little bit, for movies that were, there's probably a lot of movies, a lot of productions that weren't able to get off the ground during COVID. So these movies from 2020 now filling up the schedule in 2021, I think are going to maybe smooth out the bathtub effect a little bit.
Yeah.
For films. And, we're already seeing that. I mean, there's some trailers that came out this week. We saw The Green Knight. I can't wait to see that one.
That was going to be a South by movie that,
South by last year.
Yeah.
Yes.
Right.
But you're absolutely right. Like this is the time to start looking at these movies. This was real. It's been exciting to see. The nice thing about this last year, is I saw a count. Like we had a comparable number of actual films released as we normally have, but what we didn't have was like the same 4 studios dominating the press space. At your Cinema 14, you didn't have, Avengers 1, Batman 2, and Spider-Man 3 as the 3 movies that came out that year. And so what we saw as the effect of that is we got to see more films that would have just sort of like gotten a couple people watching them get a little bit more buzz this year. And that made it a much more competitive Oscar year. And I think that's going to feed into the next year, especially since all of the crap that's going down right now with Hollywood Foreign Press. NBC is not going to be showing Golden Globes next year. That whole organization is topsy-turvy, upside down, and spiraling down the drain, which means that, I don't know, we'll have to see how that shakes out. It's all of these things feed into each other.
Yeah, that was big news this week that the Hollywood Foreign Press Association is kind of standing down from giving out Golden Globes, right? So, and we'll also see like what things the actual production of the Oscar show is going to carry over from this year, maybe to next year. Like, hey, here's the things that worked that maybe we reintroduce back into next year's show. Knowing what worked from this little production, maybe we can kind of move some of that over in and not revert back to the same old big stodgy, production that we used to have. So we'll see how that goes.
Indeed. Well, whatever shape it takes, I'm excited to see what that looks like. I'm also excited to have a film coming out of the Oscars that I didn't get a chance to see actually before the Oscars happened, but I was finally able to catch up with. Will, Jim, I know you had an opportunity to see this previously, but Nomadland winning Best Picture, I think just perfectly sets us up for what we're going to talk about next, which is our review of that film. So, Jim, Will, are you ready to take a cross section of the Oscars, one of those films, and deep dive into it?
Ooh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. Well, for those who may be new to the Movie Bears podcast, A, welcome, and B, just a heads up, we're going to talk about Nomadland completely spoiler-free for about 15 minutes. So if you haven't seen the film yet and it winning an Oscar didn't, push you to see it for some reason, maybe hearing some of our initial spoiler-free thoughts about the film may be helpful to you. Feel free to chat with us in the live chat. Let us know, did you see it? Did you like it? Have you not seen it yet? You're on the fence. Maybe why? Feel free to join that conversation. And then when we're ready to deep dive into some spoiler action, we'll give you a fair warning so that you can step away for a while and then come on back at the end for some plugs, things you're not going to want to miss that we want to put on your radar. So all of that said, here we go. Our discussion of Nomadland. All right, Jim, I know that this film was a huge film on your radar, and you were very excited to see this once it was available. It seems fitting for you to maybe set this up for us, spoiler-free, of course, but what is the premise of this film? Kind of walk us through your thoughts. Did you like it? Is it worth seeing? Would you say it's not worth a watch? Where did you come down?
Well, this is quite a film, as you mentioned, and we'll get into its accolades and what how what happened kind of at the Oscars. We know it won Best Picture and a couple other big big awards too. Um, I'll just set it up by saying that it's a film that came out last year. It was hard to actually get up to watch last year, like a lot of kind of these big high profile Oscar type movies. Sometimes we don't get to see them until like right around Oscars or after Oscars. And that was the case with this one. This one is a drama. I would say to me, it's a character study and a drama. But if it wasn't about a fictional character at its center point, this could almost be like a documentary. I mean, it was kind of a weird cross, but I say that not to say the film was, didn't have a lot going on in it, because it did. This one stars Frances McDormand as Fern. She's a woman who leaves her hometown. She lived there a long time. She left her hometown. I'm not going to spoil too much of anything till we get into spoilers. And she becomes what they're calling like a van dweller or a nomad. These are people who basically kind of give up almost everything they have to kind of live a life on the road as nomads. And they travel around, in this case, in the case of the movie, around mostly around the West and Southwest, living at different places and having different meetups. And also working. A lot of these people are kind of semi-retired, but they do work to support themselves on the road, because it does cost to keep up a vehicle and feed yourself and all that stuff. So it's kind of a great look at this van dwelling life. It's based on a book, kind of a nonfiction book that was put out called Nomadland: Surviving America in the 21st Century. Brad, I know you'll be able to talk a little bit more about that book, because you've been reading the book by Jessica Bruder. But yeah, Frances McDormand plays Fern, and there's a few other actors in here. David Strathern is in here. Love David Strathern in a supporting role. He's very good here. Frances McDormand is excellent, obviously, winning the best actress for like the fourth time. I think she's got 4 of these things now. I've been a huge fan of Chloe Zhao since The Rider. Her film, I think it was in 2018, maybe, called The Rider, was my, I think, if not my favorite film, one of my favorite films of that year. A lot of people didn't see it. I think it did get some nominations at the time. She also did a film called "Songs My Brother Taught Me." I think that's the name of it. Yeah. Also really excellent. Her films, now that I've seen like 3 of these, are very focused on their characters. They are very much centered on the main character and the characters around them. And she just has a way of bringing out the humanity in these characters. And I'm just dying to see how that's going to play in her next film that comes out, how that's going to work in a Marvel film, because she's now directing. She has directed The Eternals, which is coming out, I think, later this year. So that'll be fun to see. But yeah, I don't want to talk too much about it. All I will say is, besides the couple actors that I mentioned, Frances McDormand, David Strathern, a lot of the folks in this film are not actors. They are not. They are the real people. They are real nomads, real van dwellers who, I mean, you watch the movie and you're like, there's no way these people have not acted before. But it was the same thing in The Rider. The lead actor in that one was not an actor, and he was like a cowboy, and she somehow brought out like a fantastic performance, and she does that again here. I mean, this is why this film, I think, was my number 1 on my list this year. I know it was high on yours, Will, too. And Brad, it wasn't on yours only because you didn't see it. So, yeah, for me, Nomadland was the best picture of the year. I'm glad it got recognized, and I'm even more glad that Chloe Zhao got recognized. I think she's the first. I want to say she's the first woman of color to win Best Director, and that's doing a lot in this industry, I think.
All right. Well, big praise from Jim. While we were talking, Pedro Roberto says in chat, I don't think it was the best movie. Was bored, to be honest. Jim, just very quickly, you had mentioned this film is a little bit of a slow burn. Do you feel like that's maybe off-putting for some?
Absolutely. I'm not saying, when I say it's the best movie for me, I don't mean it's necessarily the best movie for everybody. I'm a person who does resonate with kind of these more in-depth character studies. If you're looking for, mortal, if you're looking for like an action or a lot of plot-driven stuff, this is not necessarily, you're not necessarily going to find that here. This is a pure character study. I won't even say it's a slow burn, because usually slow burns have some kind of plot that's being driven. This one doesn't. It has, you're looking at a slice of somebody's life. That's what you're looking at. And I fully understand that. I've seen that comment before related to this movie, related to other movies that are, that were recognized this year. And that's perfectly valid, for those folks to have that reaction. Because like I said, it's not for everybody. So it may not wow, certain people who maybe just don't resonate with these type of more introspective kind of films.
All right. Very fair. Well, thank you so much for sharing your thoughts. Will, how about for you? How did this film land?
Yeah, so right there with Jim, this was one of the movies that I was most looking forward to last year, and was fortunate to be able to catch it at the Hamptons International Film Festival, which was in my living room because it was an online virtual one. So that was the nice thing about this last year. I did the New York Film Festival, the Hamptons, Colorado, and I never left my damn house. So this movie ended up... It and Minari were sort of my 1A, 1B for the year, both in terms of like how I felt about them at the time, and then how I felt about them going into award season. So it's always tricky to say, like, was this the absolute best movie of the year? I'd probably, like, gun to my head, pick Minari as my number one, but like Nomadland was so like right there with it that I was like just screaming in my seat as this one won. And certainly not all films are going to resonate with all people. It would be boring as hell if we all had exactly the same tastes. And so that is totally, totally fine. For me, what worked so well about this one is, you're right about calling it a character study. This was a movie about a character going through a very intense turning point in her life and sort of going on a journey to figure out who she was and how she was going to deal with some things. And that type of stuff I love. I love seeing how people deal with complicated things that happen in our lives, and how those people might respond in a way that isn't like me, but still seeing just the little things that resonate with the experiences that I've gone through, or being able to like latch on and say, oh, I understand why this happened. This whole movie is essentially that, but through the lens of this woman going on this van journey across the United States, taking on odd jobs. There's a little bit of a commentary on, post economic collapse, modern late stage capitalism, and the gig economy, and how that impacts people at certain rungs on the ladder, especially at certain ages of their life. All of that is in there, but it's not preachy or heavy handed. It sets the stage for what this character is going through. I would also really call a lot of attention to the cinematography in this film. This was one that I got wrong on my pool, because I thought there is absolutely zero chance that we don't have a cinematography Oscar for Chloe and her co-conspirator Justin. Gosh, I forget his name off the top of my head, and that sucks.
I'll find it for you, Will. Keep going.
Yeah. Oh, Joshua James Richards. They shot so much of this movie at what's called the golden hour, kind of like that area, kind of like right as the sun's going down, but while the sky still has ample light. So you have these beautiful tapestry skies, these wonderful shots in full widescreen of Frances or whoever she's interacting with, sort of either silhouetted or transposed against these shots. It's a marvel to watch, pun intended, I guess, because she'll be bringing those same sensibilities to Eternals coming up soon. Nomadland is the goods. It's on Hulu. You can just go watch it. You can just go watch it. After I got done with work today, I just flipped it on and watched it, and it was so exciting to be able to do that. Frances McDormand is the goods here. And Chloe Zhao, enough can't be said about her as a director, because as Jim mentioned, everyone on this cast, save for 2 or 3 actors, is just someone who's actually living this life, an untrained actor. We saw the same thing with the writer, and the same thing with Songs My Brothers Taught Me. And the performances that she pulls out of these untrained actors is absolutely uncanny. Somewhere, there is a monkey paw that is just absolutely curled up. Chloe Zhao has made some sort of pact with some sort of planar deity to be able to direct absolutely anyone into an Oscar-winning performance. Nothing against Frances McDormand here, but just Chloe Zhao does so much to just get her actors to be their best version on screen. I don't know how she does it, but I'm glad that she does.
It's more high praise coming from Will. I'm glad that both of you enjoyed this movie so much. Jim, you had mentioned, that this movie maybe didn't make my list because I hadn't seen it. Oh, I saw you hold up a finger. What's up?
Oh, I sorry for that. I was just gonna say, before you launch into whether you like the movie or not, since I had seen it a month or two before, I was kind of worried. I mean, the same thing as our listener there commented on, this is a movie where some people are going to watch this and maybe be bored. It's not going to draw them in. You know what I mean? And if it doesn't get its hooks into you, you're in for maybe a long 90 minutes, So I was a little concerned. So now we get to hear what he thought.
Well, I think you're right to be concerned. Sometimes these character studies are hit or miss for me. I feel like there needs to be enough going on to hold my interest and make the character stuff feel connected and earned, as opposed to just I'm a character. Here's what's going on in my life, and look at me dramatically smoke. But I feel like Chloe Zhao did a really great job here in giving us enough of the emotional context of the Fern character, giving us enough of the real life context of people like Swanky and Linda May and Bob Wells, to really create something special here. I absolutely love this film. And Pedro, I agree with you. It was very slow at times, especially when you consider, this film has a wonderful piano score to it. Especially because I'm learning piano right now, and it's one of the things that actually kind of got me interested in doing that. When you have slow stuff happening on screen, you have soft, sleepy piano music happening in your ears. It's sort of a recipe for I don't know, falling asleep, or if you're watching it at home, maybe pulling out your phone and seeing what's going on Facebook or Twitter. Porn Twitter, but being able to see this in a movie theater, I think, babe, helped me in this respect. And this is one of the reasons why I'm so glad that we're vaccinated now and able to get back into theaters, because, I think we've watched other movies over the last 13 months at home that have been kind of slow and have been kind of dwelling in these moments of not a lot happening, where I've done exactly that. I pick up my phone, I start looking at stuff, I start replying to text messages. And, maybe I miss some of the nuance. Maybe I'm not in it as much. So I actually felt really lucky to see this in theaters. You mentioned just the beautiful cinematography of this film. I don't think there's a single frame in this film that isn't atmospheric or captivating in some way. I bought the film through Apple Movies and iTunes, and I just randomly like fast forwarded and stopped in different spots just to see if I could land on a single shot that wasn't somehow like poignant in some way, and I couldn't do it. I must have stopped in 20 different places. Maybe there was a shot of like them reaching into a trash can where I was like, yeah, okay, whatever. But like, I don't know, it was pretty great stuff. Jim, you mentioned me reading the book. I want to talk about that because, Will, I don't know if you've read it, but I'm about halfway through at this point, and it's fascinating for me to read about characters like Swanky and Linda May, the things that they talk about in the film and things that they show off, from their vans, items that are special to them, stories that they tell. These are all things straight out of the book. The writer basically spent a year living in what they call wheel estate, traveling with these people, following them around, being a van dweller. And it's amazing to me that this is happening for so many people right now. And like, we don't even know it. Like, we probably don't even think about it before watching a film like this and finding out about it. Man, I'm slowly going through the book. I'm making myself parse it out because I don't want it to be over too quick. But it's pretty phenomenal to see these same characters on the screen. And you're absolutely right, Jim. If you had told me that like these were not, really actors on the screen, like playing these people, I wouldn't have believed it. I'd have been like, no, you're kidding. Like, this is someone who's playing Linda May. But no, it's actually her. I do find it interesting, though, that they made up this character of Fern, who is actually an amalgam of a few different characters. Well, not characters, people in the book, pulling together some of the different plot lines and putting them into one person. Yeah. I kind of wonder why they didn't just pick someone like Swanky or Linda May and have them be the main character. But I guess then you can't pull in a Frances McDormand to, help you have this amazing Oscar performance, So this is a huge, incredible film for me. But as much as I love Frances McDormand, I do kind of wish that like a Linda May or a Swanky had been the main character, and we could have learned more about them through the film that way. But I think that's a small caveat to what is a really, really big, huge, and wonderful film.
There might be some of it too where, and I don't know, but just sort of my thought process on it might be Chloe Zhao wanting to err on the side of, I think that you run the risk of something like that, of making your film exploitative. Not that it necessarily would have been 100% if it had been about Swanky or Linda May or whoever. But I think that that's something that could happen with some filmmakers very easily. And so by using this particular character, there's some very specific like emotional narrative beats that she has to go through. And you can apply those to her and sort of like psychoanalyze her through the film. Like, you can put more of a, let's explore why we think she's doing this with a little bit more judgment on a fictional character than maybe on a real character. I think that's probably why she went the way she went.
Yeah. And I mean, besides the things we've already talked about, I think for myself, the things that helped it really resonate strongly with me is, number one, I'm a lot closer in age to some of those people that are doing this, to Fern and Swanky and Linda May and certainly Bob Wells. And, I have this kind of, there's a little wanderlust in me, right? Like, there's a little love of the outdoors, camping, a lot of the stuff that I really love is kind of like thrown in, and it's kind of me is kind of touched on in this movie. And I think that's why it resonates a lot with me. Don't worry, babe. I don't think I'm going to be like selling the house and buying a camper anytime soon. But, because I mean that, and you're reading the book, but I'm sure that life is, and don't get me wrong, this movie did not dress up what this life is really like in a lot of ways. We'll talk about that in spoilers coming up here. But still, I'm sure there's a lot of hardship in that life. I think it's a largely solitary life for a lot of these people, at least the characters we saw. And there's a kind of a thread of loneliness that certainly runs through the Fern character and some of the other characters. And a lot of these folks, and I don't know if it's touched on in the book, but a lot of the motivation for these people to do what they're doing and kind of give up the rat race life is because they kind of want to be alone. A lot of them kind of want that solitude. They want the space. So yeah, and all that stuff is in here, and I think just wonderfully put together.
It doesn't surprise me that you ended up liking this one, Brad. I was worried too, you just don't know, movie that I absolutely love, but I know it's like a slower pace. Is so-and-so going to like it? But at the same time, I feel like the closest spiritual kin to this movie is actually the movie Wild, because they come from a similar place in terms of like how the character goes on their arc, kind of a similar way in the way that they explore what they do during their arc. They're both adaptations of actual stories. So it doesn't surprise me to hear that you're reading it too, because you went through the same journey yourself with Wild. And so coming into this, I'm like, I think Brad may have liked this one. So I'm glad that you did.
Yeah, definitely interesting to compare it to Wild. And Jim, not to retread what happened the day we went to see the movie, but Jim had made the same comment ahead of seeing the film, and I try to like take other people's feelings and things and separate myself from them because I don't want to have my experience colored. And Jim had mentioned moments before going into the film that comparison, and while initially I was kind of like, oh fuck, did you really just say that? As the movie was playing and as it was happening, I mean, I absolutely could see some similarities. I don't know Chloe Zhao's process. I don't know if maybe she really loved that movie, but there were a lot of things I saw in the film. Not necessarily beat for beat, of course not, but like just the way that the camera would linger, just like a few extra moments beyond like what was comfortable or maybe standard for like a moment that we were watching, that reminded me a lot of just how things played out in Wild. So I've started doing this thing now where I watch Wild once a year, kind of around my birthday, similar to the thing I do with The Princess Bride. It's like I watch one silly movie and I watch one serious movie. Now I'm wondering if I'm going to have one silly movie and two serious movies. I feel like these are soul movies. I feel like regardless of who you are and what you've done in life, there are things that you can relate to and attach to with these characters. And they kind of take you on a journey through the long, dark night of the soul. But like, there's some hopeful things there too. And I'm anxious to talk about this in spoilers. We'll get there, but I'm just very thankful to live in a world where we have films like Wild and Nomadland. I do want to shout out to Pedro in the chat who says, it would give me a lot of anxiety to live this way though, live in real estate, be a van dweller, but no judgment. And Pedro, I agree with you. In fact, I was having a lot of anxiety in myself, watching things play out in this film. Like if you're living out in your van, like what happens if you get a flat tire and you have a spare donut tire and then the spare goes flat and you're out in the middle of nowhere? And, if you were to go back and look at like the heart rate records from my watch while I was watching the movie, you'd probably find several peaks, where that anxiety was happening. So, babe, to your comment earlier, I know you're not looking to sell the house anytime soon, but hey, if we ever want to get an RV and maybe like, I don't know, spend a couple weeks driving around or something.
Well, maybe we could rent one. Not make the whole commitment, but
there you go. There you go. Maybe here's what we'll do. We'll rent an RV. We're going to drive it to Austin. We'll pick up you and Wiggles and the pups, and then we'll just go for like a week, just driving around Texas or something. And it'll be amazing. We'll either want to kill each other by the end of it, or we'll be better friends than we've ever been.
We'll know how to patch a flat. If we can panhandle if we need to. We can. You could bring. I was going to say you can't bring your piano, but you can bring a Casio keyboard and entertained by the by campfire at night.
We'll
Not
bring
a
our
guitar,
ukes.
not
We'll
a
bring our
guitar, but a
ukes.
ukulele. That's small.
There we go.
Okay, all right,
We can play our ukes.
But I mean,
All right.
I think in the movie, I don't know if they touched on it in the movie, but a lot of folks that do this, it's probably mentioned in the book. A lot of folks that do this don't really last at it. They try it and they find that they're just not cut out for it, whether it's the loneliness or the boredom or whatever sets in, and or the lack of convenience, right? Could be a lot of different things, but a lot of people don't. And then others like Swanky and Linda May and Bob Wells, that's their life, and that's kind of in their DNA. It's interesting.
Yeah, indeed. Well, fellas, how do we feel about talking some spoilers for the next 19 minutes and 15 seconds? Do you feel like you're ready for that?
Yeah, we have some things to talk about.
We do. All right, folks. Well, if you are watching live, this is the part where you may want to step away for the next little while and then come on back in about 20 minutes or so. If you're listening through the magic of digital tape delay on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or however you access your podcast, feel free to use the time index in the handy dandy show notes that Jim puts together for you to go ahead and skip ahead as needed. And then after you've seen Nomadland, come on back. Listen to our spoilery part of the show, and then let us know your thoughts on Twitter or Facebook. We'd love to hear from you about what you thought. But spoilers for Nomadland are officially fair game. Where do you guys want to start?
Well, I would say that, like, if we're really considering trying this out, we have to do the poop in the bucket test first. Like, if you're not willing to poop in a bucket, a 5-gallon pail or 3-gallon pail,
or you can do a 7-gallon, depending on how much you want to squat. We learned that.
Yeah. Listen. I poop in pit toilets when we go camping all the time. I'd much rather poop in a bucket that I can see the bottom of than the scary pit toilet that probably has 1,000 spiders.
Yeah.
So I think we can make it work.
Well, then you got to clean it out. That's the part that I'm not too thrilled about. Anyway, but let's. So that's. It was interesting that they showed that. Like, you haven't 4-time now Oscar-winning actress, like, pooping in a bucket on screen, complete with noises and everything. Like, you don't get smell-o-vision, but you definitely get pretty much the full effect, and that's pretty. As they're doing that, I'm like, okay, cut away now, please. Cut away.
Uh-huh.
I get the idea. You can cut away now anytime, but nope. Chloe Zhao is committed to her shots and getting her feelings, and I think that's fine. I think it's wonderful. How often you're going to see Kate Winslet poop in a bucket anytime soon? I doubt it.
What got me
Not often.
was that the poop bucket was right next to the bed. Like, you sit up in bed and then just hop over to the poop bucket. Like, yeah. I think it'd have to be at the other end of the van for me.
They're just so small. Everything's at the end of that's beside the bed.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's the thing. Like, with the size of that van, like, aside from that, it might be like having it like in view of whoever might be like looking in, kind of like the front windshield or something like that. So there's probably like some practicality there. Yeah, it's hard. This is why this is not the life for me. But I love that this was a character who we got to see. This was a very, very big film on giving us a drip feed of exposition about who Fern was during her marriage and during her adolescence and during every stage of her life leading up to the start of this movie. We learn all of that through just these little nuggets of conversation. We find out that she's this, she was a bit of like a wanderer as a young woman who always had to sort of like get out there and kind of do her own thing, fiercely independent. We found that, once she got married to Beau, some of that settled down a little bit, and she sort of repressed that part of her life, and she was happy to do so because she had something satisfying in her marriage and in her, the little factory town that, the little industry town that she lived in. We got to hear her talking about the mountains behind her home and how she wanted to explore that area. And it was always so inviting, this promise. We got to see this woman who, in her grief, had tethered herself to a memory of a place and was no longer allowing herself to like go off and do the things that were core to who she was, because she felt as though it would be disrespectful to a memory. But through this process, she learns how to channel her grief back into finding herself. That is powerful for anyone that's experienced grief before. You do like have these moments of like, I'm putting myself on pause. Like, I don't know if I should I go and like laugh with friends again? That's disrespectful to the memory of the person that I lost. When do I go back to normal? When do I get back into the world? When do I just have a day where I forget that I'm grieving and just experience myself as myself? That is a very universal process, regardless of whether you happen to be in a van or in your own home, surrounded by friends, or someone who's fiercely independent and comfortable with isolation. I loved watching that here. This was a very relatable story, even if the actual experiences that she went through are very foreign to me.
Oh, absolutely. And, in those experiences, like there's a lot of sadness in this film, in that it's not like, nothing tragic necessarily happens on screen per se. Like there's
Right.
no big death scenes or anything like that. But the her visit back to the town and the factory town that she worked in, and she actually goes to the factory, and through some of the conference rooms that she probably worked in. I guess she worked in HR at this factory, and her husband also worked in the factory, I gather. And as a guy like myself, who I'm not like a factory worker, but I've worked for the same company now for like over 30 years. And, at the end of that, if in the case of the movie, to see that all go to dust and be like, no more, that's a huge part of her life that she has to wrestle with. Like, what did I do for that part of my life? I was devoted to my husband, yes, but I was also devoted to this job in this town, and now it's no more. So she basically has to like pick herself up and basically, like you said, Will, kind of rediscover really who she is, or kind of reinvent herself a little bit. And there's an interesting scene at the beginning of the movie where she's outside a store, I think, and there's a stray dog that comes along.
Yeah.
And and like kind of brushes against her leg, and it's wagging its tail. And I think she pets it. And then, she comes out of the store, and the dog's still there. And it's like, oh, okay, well, she's going to take this dog. This dog's going to be your companion for the whole movie. But nope, the movie, like, the dog walks away, and she stays there, and you expect she walks away from the dog. You expect, but the camera stays stationary right on the front of the store where the dog is, and you expect her to come walking back on screen to get the dog, and she doesn't, right? And just that's a perfect example of like show and don't tell. Like, you learn so much about her character through that scene and the other little tidbits you get through the movie in her relationships with people. It's just I think it's just incredible writing, and Chloe Zhao gets credit for that. She's the director, but she's also the screenwriter here. She wrote this for the screen, and this is all a fictional character, so I don't even think much of that is in the book. But it just, that to me is fantastic storytelling.
Yeah, and one of the things I really appreciated about the storytelling in this film was also just its locality, and bringing us into where these journeys are happening that we don't even necessarily think about. One of the big locations in the film is Quartzsite, Arizona, and Jim, you can attest to this. Whenever we go to Palm Springs, we drive through Quartzsite. We stop for gas in Quartzsite. We see the mineral places like Fern works at in Quartzsite. We see the RV parks. And prior to seeing this film, every time we drive through, it was just like, oh, well, this is kind of an interesting place, but like it's a ramshackle town in the middle of nowhere. Like, do people really live here? But like after seeing this film now, and especially now reading the book too, and reading about the experiences of Swanky and Linda May, who play, versions of themselves in the film. But like this is a real place. Like Bob Wells has a real group that gets together here every year, for this van dweller like convergence in a form and fashion. And part of me, Jim, like wants to rent an RV and like go to this thing and just experience this like a discount store Burning Man or something. You know what I mean? Like just take an RV and go, not that I want to be houseless. But it could be an interesting experience. But I don't think I'll ever be able to drive through Quartzsite anymore without thinking about these amazing people and the things, that they're going through that people probably don't even give a second thought. Like, babe, can you ever look at an RV park like that again and
No.
not wonder?
Yeah. Instead of renting an RV and going, Bill, I would definitely maybe like to swing through Quartzsite on a day, for a day and just kind of take it all in and see what it's all about. That would be pretty awesome. Pretty amazing.
I like that the film did not. I think you also run a real risk with having sort of a voyeuristic tourism of something that is very really impacting people. Some people veer into this because disconnecting from kind of like the shackles of what society can be is liberating for them. Some were brought into this because of circumstance, economy, joblessness, things along those lines, and some a combination of the two, right? And I think that it would be very easy to make this feel just like, boy, wouldn't everything be better if we could just get out on the open road and leave all of this behind, and sort of make light of some of the very real circumstances. And the film doesn't do that. We do have Frances McDormand's character, Fern, who talks about, what it is to be houseless versus homeless, what it is to deal with like predatory, homelenders and mortgage companies. Like, we got to see all those things. But as I mentioned before, at the same time, it doesn't tip over too heavy the other way. I think this movie could have very easily gone the other direction and been a very preachy issues movie. And yes, these issues do need to be looked at and resolved, but this movie found a sort of a middle lane that sort of wove through it, acknowledging the circumstances, but also being able to tell a story of someone finding themselves and almost finding like a very quiet level of triumph within those very real circumstances.
Absolutely. And this movie took a bit of criticism, at least in kind of the Twitter circles that I watch, regarding the gig workforce lifestyle, or especially around Amazon, right? Amazon is notorious in the news, right, for its treatment of workers and the working conditions and salaries or pay scale and whatnot. This movie showed some of that on a very neutral it took a very neutral view of it, I think. It didn't glamorize the work that Fern was doing and some of her friends at Amazon, and it didn't demonize it. At least from my perspective, it took and I think the fact that it took a neutral perspective, I think a lot of people took issue with, because I think they thought it should have been maybe a more issues-centered film, at least in that regard. And for one, I understand the issues, and I sympathize. I empathize with those, and we certainly don't want to see that happen. But I don't necessarily want to see that in this movie. That wasn't this movie. For me anyway, that wasn't what this movie was.
That's perfectly right. Like, this was a movie that was about another thing entirely, that was set against the backdrop of someone who was going through the gig economy. Those issues are very real. There's a very real exploitation of the workforce. And I'm not just talking about Amazon. I'm talking about damn near any like major corporation or major chain at this point is guilty to some degree or another of those same things. And as you start to really investigate like kind of the sins of each of them, you know, those tally marks that you'd be making would fill the page. But this was not that movie. This was not the movie about finding out what's wrong with Amazon. This is showing someone who, in this particular situation, this was just one of several seasonal pass-through jobs that she had. All of them were kind of good and kind of bad in that she was able to support her lifestyle, but she also had to deal with people literally like ignoring her and taking a piss right next to her in certain spots of it. You know, it didn't glamorize the different jobs that she was doing, but it always focused on Fern's experience and Fern's growth more so than kind of the universal issues.
And or lack of growth. And I was happy to see the movie go that route too. You know, she has certain things about herself that don't necessarily change. You know what I mean? Like things don't wrap up. She doesn't have this like magical, wonderful, you know, romantic relationship at the end of the film. Like she's been resisting that the whole movie. And at the end of the movie, she's still fucking on her own, doing her own thing, not giving into that. And I don't know if you would count that as not growing as growth, but it's interesting to see that character sort of stay true to her nature. And those final moments of her, you know, going back to that abandoned town and seeing her old house. And Jim, you and I had an interesting discussion as to whether that, you know, signifies that she's like forever caught in the cycle, or whether this was her like saying goodbye to that cycle, like letting go. You know what I mean? And I love that the movie doesn't spoon feed it to us one way or the other. It's kind of up to us to decide. But I'm curious as we close out our discussion of Nomadland. What do you guys think? Was she saying goodbye to the things she was holding on to in her past, or is she forever caught up in it, or maybe somewhere in the middle?
It's a good question.
Yeah, go ahead, Jim.
No, it's a good question. I don't know. I don't know. I think it could be argued either way. I don't think the movie gives us a pat answer, and I'm glad for that. Right? I'm glad for endings of movies that can be interpreted maybe a couple of different ways. I like to think that it's hopeful, you know, for her that she can make it on her own in this life, if that's what she wants to do. Obviously she's not going back to that house in that town. I think it was, to me, it was probably more toward a hopeful, like letting go of the past. Not that she's going to forget the past, right? She's never going to forget her life with Bo and, you know, the great relationship she may have had at work and the meaning she got out of that work. But you know, I hope that she, this is a character you kind of root for to kind of embrace her new life.
Yeah, 100%. This was for me, this was Fern's growth. Not that she had a fundamental change in kind of who she was as a person, but more that she allowed herself to be the person that she always was. You know, this was a character who has that wanderlust. She's a nomad by heart, and she's allowed her grief to anchor her to a place that is no longer a home for her, that no longer has anything except for sentimentality and nostalgia to her. And so as she sets out on her journey the first time, she always has sort of like 1 foot back home and 1 foot in the van as she's going around. When she comes back, her growth is being able to let go of all of that, to be that self-dependent person who she always has been, but without those same anchors. She's learned how she can carry those things with her on the road, but still in a way that lets her live her truest self. This last year, I think, has put a lot of us in a similar situation. I think that a lot of us have had to deal with a very large change in our lives as the pandemic has come through. We've had to deal with the fact that we have this isolation that's been thrust upon us. And I think, like Fern, a lot of us were still in this position of one foot in the past and one foot in the present through a lot of the pandemic. You know, I'm alone in my house, I'm going crazy, but everything else is out there. And one of the things that I love so much seeing in my life and a lot of people's lives is I think there was a moment in the pandemic where we learned to almost thrive in a certain way in our new environments. I saw this from a lot of people finding new hobbies, finding new ways of connecting with one another virtually, people adapting to their work life and their social life, finding ways that they can still do the things that make them themselves in this new setup. And I love that it's now gotten to this point where, like Fern, all of us are at this spot where, as we're emerging from our homes, vaccinated, hopefully, masked up, yes, but we are looking at this world around us, and now we're saying, hey, I said earlier I'd see you down the road, and now we are. We didn't know when it was going to be, but it's now. And I think just like that, I think that's the hopefulness that I get out of this, about this movie. This is a character who has put herself through the ringer, but has come out of it a more distilled version of herself. And I think she's going to embrace this nomad lifestyle in a way that is going to just truly let her blossom in the way that probably uniquely she and the other people in her community can blossom.
Yeah. Well, you touched on it a little bit, but this movie, I don't know if it's just kismet that it was produced in this year, last year, but it does have a very weird, very real sense or palpable connection to the feelings of last year. There's just some kind of resonance between the feelings that I get from this movie and the feelings that I think a lot of us felt going through the pandemic. It's weird. It's not about a pandemic. It's not a direct correlation, but I think some of the feelings are exactly the same. And I think it struck a chord with some people on that level.
Good chord to strike, I think, in a lot of different ways. Well, great film. A lot of really great conversation. I think there's probably a lot more that we could talk about if we had a Nomadland episode part 2, Electric Boogaloo. But I just feel, very lucky to have this film, and, God bless Chloe Zhao for making such an incredible piece of art. I really want to get back to Quartzsite, babe. And I never thought I'd ever say that's a place I deliberately want to go. Yeah, I want to do it without being a gawker. I think it'd be cool to maybe stay there for a couple nights to feel like I've earned the ability to walk around and talk to people. You know what I mean?
We could be that dude who sits, the cowboy hitchhiker dude who sits around the campfire and smokes cigarettes with Fern.
Gosh, but
I have no idea how to unpack that, but maybe we could talk about it at a later time. But they hit on those scenes a couple times, and it's kind of it's like, I know, Chloe, I know the filmmakers are trying to say something here, and other than just being kind to people, there must be something in there. And I don't know. I'll unpack it on another viewing, I'm sure.
I do worry that because Best Picture winner, and people now know where you can go and find these people. I really hope that it doesn't become like a broad tourism destination from the standpoint of people in the background with their phones out, taking pictures as they're sitting around the campfire. There's a certain part that's just oh God, I didn't even think about that until just now. But yeah,
there's already YouTube videos out there about how Nomadland has ruined, van life and nomading for these people already.
Oh,
but
really? Yeah.
There are
videos.
I haven't watched them yet, but I have a feeling that I have a sense that feeling may subside once the splash, after a year or so, I think.
Yeah, it could be. And that's why I say, if we were ever to go, I wouldn't want it to be just going to gawk. I would want to go to get to know some of those people and, learn more about their lifestyle. And, I did just learn, by the way, that Swanky, FYI, does not have brain cancer, and
No,
she is
no,
not dying.
that
Uh,
was.
that was her husband, actually. That happened to her
Oh,
husband. But
okay.
Swanky is still alive and well and is the queen of Quartzsite. So maybe we could meet her, babe, and hear some stories.
Be awesome.
Indeed. Well, fellas, as we look to wrap up here, I know we have some plugs that we want to spin out, and we haven't had much of a chance to do plugs lately. So why don't we go ahead and we'll just set Nomadland aside for now, so we get into some plugs. For those
See
of
you
you
down
who,
the road, Nomadland.
that's right. See you down the road. Thank you, Bob Wells. For those of you who may be new to the show or you're unfamiliar with this segment, this is where we put things on your radar that we really love. It could be movies, TV, music, video games. It doesn't have to be just movies, but I mean, sometimes it often is. But let's start with Will. Will, what have you got that you want to put on the radar for our listeners and watchers this week?
Yeah, so let's talk a little bit more animation since we talked about a bunch of animation earlier. The Mitchells versus the Machines is another Netflix animated movie. This is by, it's by the same people, or many of the same people that did Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse and the Lego Movie. And it's this movie about this dysfunctional family that's on this like road trip, and they end up thrust into the middle of the robot apocalypse and have to become the ones, the kind of the last family standing to save the world. Wonderful voice talents. Abby Jacobson, who you probably recognize from things like, Broad City is her big thing. Plays a young college, like getting ready to go to college girl who is an absolute like she makes these like quirky, weird like films and is trying to go to film school. Very, very relatable character for a lot of, people that be probably drawn to a movie podcast. She's one of the main characters. She's set at odds with her father, played by Danny McBride, who's channeling like Nick Offerman energy. Is sort of like he's more into like carving and hunting style father. The two just don't connect super well.
Nick Offerman.
No. Like this is very much like, think like Nick Offerman a la like Parks and Rec. That's sort of the energy that like Danny McBride brings. Maya Rudolph is in this. Eric Andre. Olivia Colman is in a pretty big role. Fred Armisen, Beck Bennett, Chrissy Teigen, John Legend. Charlene Yee, who most people won't know about, but is whenever she pops up in something, that's the voice of Ruby from Steven Universe. Whenever she pops up in something, I go absolutely giddy. This thing is filled with just absolutely interesting and weird animation that sort of like breaks its own rules, always for kinetic energy and to tell us kind of what's going on with kind of the characters' like thoughts and how she's feeling about a situation at a given time. It's really funny. It's a lot of fun. Mitchells versus the Machines. It's an absolute delight. You should 100% go watch it on Netflix right now.
Getting a lot of buzz out there.
Indeed. All right. Thanks so much, Will. Jim, what have you got this week?
I am partway into a limited series on HBO called Mayor of Easttown. This is a detective show. So Kate Winslet is the main detective in this. She lives in this small town of Easttown, and she's a detective who's investigating a local murder while trying to keep her life from falling apart. Do you remember that? It was similar to a series we watched with Amy Adams.
Sharp Objects.
Sharp Objects, yeah. Really good stuff in here. The cast is amazing. Besides Kate Winslet, we've got Jean Smart, who plays her mother, who's excellent here. Guy Pearce is in this, shows up in this, and I'm like, what? That's Guy Pearce. And then Evan Peters is in this one. From I think he played what is it? Silver? What is it? Who did he play? One of the X-Men.
Oh, Quicksilver.
Quicksilver, yeah, Quicksilver from the X-Men. He's in this. Some great acting. Good writing. Now, the only problem with this is I'm only halfway through the series, and it's It's an HBO series, so they're issuing the shows 1 week at a time on Sunday nights, and I am, they've only released 4 so far. So if you're the type who likes to binge, and this would be a very bingeable show, you may want to wait a few weeks and then watch them all on HBO, because a lot of people who are used to binging just don't do well with these shows, like getting it. Having to wait. Do you remember those days when we had to wait a week for the next episode of a show to come out? But this is one of those.
I've been waiting for me. I've been waiting a month and a half for the next episode of Superman and Lois, so I still very much remember what that's like.
Well, about a month and a half. That's like a season break, right?
I had to watch season 2 of The Circle in 3-episode drops, so I get you.
Yeah. No, but I'm okay with it. I'm a pretty patient guy when it comes to that. And this show is definitely worth it. I think the performance that we're getting from Kate Winslet is gonna, I think, make a lot of waves. This is a Kate Winslet that you may not have seen before. She is a rough around the edges detective, and it's really awesome to see. So the name of it is Mayor of Easttown. It's not mayor as in the town's elected leader, mayor. It's Mayor, Mare, of Easttown. Check it out. It's on HBO. Yeah. Well, her name is Mayor. Now I don't know if it's for Marion or Mary or Marilyn. I have no idea yet, but maybe we'll find out.
Good to know. Well, glad to hear that you are enjoying. My plug this week is a series that I'm a little bit late to the party on. But if there's anybody else out there like me that either didn't hear about the series or you heard about it, but you just haven't had a chance to catch up with it, I want to call it out. This is a TV show from Amazon. It's an Amazon original called Invincible. It's an animated superhero show based on the comic series by Robert Kirkman, famed creator of The Walking Dead. Jim and I got an opportunity to catch up with the first episode of this series. I am jonesing to watch more. We got a house guest right after we watched the first episode. And you know how it is when you have house guests. You just, you kind of stop binging all the shows that you've started watching to like take them around town and do other things and, entertain them. So Jim, I'd really like to get back to watching this with you if you're at all interested. But talking about Minari earlier reminded me of Steven Yeun, who plays one of the main characters on this show. Will, I don't know if you've seen it yet.
Yes, I have. Yeah.
Cool. Steven Yeun plays one of the main characters, Mark Grayson, who's like a super boyish type character who's being toodled by his father, Omni-Man, who's obviously a Superman stand-in. And that J.K. Simmons' performance in that Omni-Man character, at least so far, has just been fantastic. So it's bloody, it's violent, it does lots of things you probably wouldn't expect from what kind of seems like a Justice League-esque TV show. But it's kind of brilliant so far. So I can't wait to watch more. I hear some really crazy shit goes down, and in the first episode, some really crazy shit goes down. But super good. So check it out. Amazon original.
That first episode is designed to hook people, and it definitely hooked me because it really goes to some crazy places. I'll just say that. And so for that reason alone, I'm willing to at least follow up with one or two more. See how
I would, it's a super good show, Brad, though. I'd be very careful with social media right now. You know how every so often, like, something becomes like the meme that's like repeatable, people will like change the thought bubble on something or change the characters in the pose that are doing something to tell another story or whatever. Well, there's something from the finale that is the current, I've seen like 12 different examples of it on my social media feed right now. Wow. It is a very spoilery time right now. So be extra careful around social media. It'd be hard to avoid a very specific thing, but
I appreciate
the internet's not doing a good job of. Yeah. So binge through as soon as you can, just to be on the safe side.
I've been spending a lot less time on Reddit and Facebook lately. In fact, it feels a little weird to be so away from social media, except for Twitter porn, that like maybe my risk for that is very low. But I'll definitely be on the lookout, Will, and I appreciate you calling that out.
The internet ruins everything now.
This is why we can't have nice things.
The nice thing is if you're able to duck it between now and then, it might have blown over to the point that, like, when you get to the finale, you may come back and say, "Okay, Will, what was the meme?" Like, it's you know how quickly things go. Like, it may be done in like 4 days or whatever. So just but still, just be mindful. It's
something to be aware of.
Bad right now. Yeah.
Cool. All right. Well, that does it for us this week. Real quick, in case people want to talk about film or whatever between now and our next recording, Jim, where can people interface with you online?
The best place to interface with me is either through Twitter or Facebook. On Twitter, my handle is at JJP Out West. Those are my initials, JJP, and then the words Out West. And you can also find me on Facebook under my regular name, Jim Pugliafico.
All right. Excellent. Will, how about you?
Hey, you can find me on Twitter. I'm at Whatever Cove, which if you look right here beneath my chin, if you're watching live, you can find my handle. You can also find me on Facebook. Just look for Will Lindis. Send me your Invincible memes. I've seen it. I won't be spoiled. And then go to Letterboxd and give me a follow there. It's just where I talk about movies because I like talking about movies. So follow me on Letterboxd. I'll follow you back.
All right. Excellent. And you can find me on Facebook. Just search for Brad Harris. I'm the one who likely has Chub Chaser and Bear friends in common with you. You can also find me on Twitter at iBradPro. We will see you all next week. Thanks so much for joining us. Don't forget, check out our back catalog of episodes on YouTube if you want to watch the video versions. They're all there. If you want to listen to audio versions, you can find those through Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or however you digest your podcasts. Take a gander. We've had some pretty great discussions over the last 8 years and 402 episodes. So if you're looking for something to do, maybe that could be an option. Take care, everybody. Stay safe, be well, and we'll catch you all next time. See you down the road. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye-bye.